This is Bob Oliphant from the Westford Historical Society and Museum, bringing you episode 32 of season 4 of the Westford Wardsman podcast. The Westford Wardsman newspaper was part of Turner's Public Spirit, a weekly newspaper in Ayer a century ago. In this episode, we'll be reading the Wardsman for the week ending Saturday, August 12, 1911, and I'll elaborate on what was happening in Westford that week. The week starts with the Westford Center section. Owing to the fact that at the time the Congregational Sunday School went to Canopy Lake for the annual picnic, a number of families, for various good reasons, could not attend. Mr. Wallace and Mr. Osgood, Mr. Wallace is the pastor and Mr. Osgood is a deacon, arranged for another outing. This supplementary picnic took place at Nabnasset Pond on Thursday of last week and proved most successful and enjoyable. About 50 were in attendance, and the day was spent in boating, playing baseball, croquet, and a picnic dinner at noon. Miss Hazel B. Hartford is enjoying a week's stay at Silver Lake, Newton Junction, New Hampshire, the guest of Miss Dorothy Jakes. A real estate transfer of much interest last week is the sale by George Gould of his place, which was 7 Depot Street, to John P. Wright. Mr. Wright has been trying for some time to secure a home for himself and family in Westford, and he is to be congratulated in attaining this centrally located property, consisting of a good set of buildings and about 4 acres of land. Mr. Gould plans to vacate as soon as possible, but has not fully planned where he will locate. His removal from town means the loss to the community of a useful and capable man. The next 3 Sundays, beginning tomorrow, will be the vacation at the Congregational Church. There will be no morning service, but the evening service at 7 o'clock will be sustained under the auspices of the Christian Endeavor Society. Among summer guests, it was pleasant to have in the congregation last Sunday morning were Mrs. Martha Taylor Howard and Mrs. Edward Atwood. Mrs. J. Herbert Fletcher and son John are expected home this weekend after several weeks' sojourn at Francistown, New Hampshire, and Ludlow, Vermont. The Herbert V. Hildreths were at camp over Sunday, and Martin Seavey was the guest of Leon Hildreth. Frank B. Hawks and son Wesley of Malden visited at Alfred W. Hartford's during the week. Mrs. Alvin Fisher and Miss Clara Fisher are spending the month of August at the Fisher Camp on Forge Pond. It was a keen, alert game played between Westford and Townsend last Saturday afternoon at Townsend. The Westford team won the game with a score of 4-3. A good delegation from Westford went up to enjoy the game. Today, August 12th, the Westford team plays with the Shirley team at Ayer. Each team has a game to its credit, and this is to be the rubber game. A good number are planning to attend from here. The game, of course, is the game of baseball. The next section is called Tax Rate. At last, the assessors have received the state tax, the legislature having adjourned. The state tax amounted for the town to $3,300, county tax $2,167, and highway tax $162.50. The assessors have given the warrant to the collector, and he has issued his bills. The total tax levy is $31,245.18. The amount on real estate is $20,354.35. It's gone up a little since then. And on personal property, $9,087.97. The moth tax is $334.86. The number of poll taxes is 734, and they each paid $2 each. The tax rate per $1,000 is $14.20 against $16 last year. This decreased rate is especially due to increases on personal property. And then this is followed by a list of all the taxpayers who paid $50 or more during the year, which I will not read. The next paragraph is called Gifts to the Library. During the past few weeks, Mr. Raymond of Boston, who is well known here from his former gifts to the town, has favored the library with several specimens from his collection of rare and beautiful works of art. The 10 vases and jars which he has given recently are proving of great interest to those in the community who appreciate such work for its beauty and educational value, and to the strangers who always visit us during the summer. 5 of the vases are from China, 3 of them being of crackleware, 1 of oxblood, and 1 of Confucius ware. 2 fine specimens of Japanese satsuma complete the Oriental collection. The remaining 3 represent the work of European nations by samples of Royal Worcester, French Delft, and a beautiful German ware. These pieces form a permanent addition to the decorations and will repay careful study. Next section is the About Town section. Mrs. Sarah B. Wheeler of Palo Alto, California, although 80 years old, is making her annual visit to New England relatives and friends. She called this week upon her niece, Mrs. George Snow of West Chelmsford. Other relatives, Mr. and Mrs. Frank Stark of Nashua, New Hampshire, brought her down in their auto, coming through Westford Center for the sake of the mountain view and a glimpse of our beautiful village. Miss Sarah Richardson of the Fletcher Farm at Brookside took a carriage drive to Oak Hill to see the busy and modern-equipped stone quarry of the Honorable Herbert E. Fletcher and Company of Westford. She saw much that was new indeed, and for a woman of 93, she maintained much interest in it all. She was accompanied by her niece, Miss Ella Wright of Cleveland, Ohio. Augustus F. Whidden, in his usual courteous manner, took them for this drive. Professor N.B. Parker of Ricker Classical Institute, Maine, has been visiting his college friend, John Taylor, and Miss Edith Wallace of Nashua, New Hampshire, has been the guest of her college friend, Mrs. Martha Taylor Howard. William R. Taylor and John A. Taylor, brothers, leave today for a vacation at York Beach, Maine. Amos Poley of the Prairie Farm has just completed digging a new well on Francis Hill with an aqueduct attachment for watering cattle in the pasture. This makes 5 wells on the farm, 2 on Francis Hill, 3 on the prairie. The old Walker homestead on Main Street has again been visited by the relatives of its old hearthstone, Mrs. Clara Littlefield and son Edward of Fitchburg, and the Mrs. Elsie and Minnie Coffin of Berwick, Maine, were those who added social cheer to this old homestead. Next is the Forge Village section. The Mrs. Long of Lowell visited at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Fenimore Morton over Sunday. Fred Longbottom of Arlington Heights visited in the village on Saturday. Miss Eliza Daly returned home on Monday after a very pleasant visit with her nephew, William Daly of Boston. John May has returned from New York City, where he has been spending the past week. Miss Grace Lawrence is spending a few days with relatives in Reading. Work was resumed in the Abbott and Company's mills on Monday morning after a vacation of 1 week. Until further notice, the combing, carding, and washrooms will run 4 days a week, the spinning and twisting rooms running 5 days. On Monday, the 54-hour schedule will commence, the mill closing at 5:05 p.m. Reverend A.L. Bumpus conducted the services held in St. Andrew's Mission on Sunday. Mr. Bumpus will officiate at the regular services tomorrow. Miss May Lord, who is taking a course of training at the South Framingham Hospital, was the weekend guest at the home of her parents, Mr. and Mrs. David Lord. She was a nurse. Miss Sarah Precious has returned after a pleasant visit at the home of her sister, Mrs. Michael Keefe of Townsend Harbor. That's her sister. Norman Nichols of Everett and friend spent the weekend at the Nickel Cottage on Forge Pond. Mrs. Susan Reed and Mr. and Mrs. Goodchild, Walter Reed and son Randolph of Lowell, are guests at the home of Mrs. Lucretia Reed. Mrs. Reed celebrated her 64th wedding anniversary on Sunday, 4 generations sitting down to dinner. Mrs. Reed is in her 84th year and is enjoying the best of health. Miss Abby M. Blaisdell of Wamisit visited at the home of Mr. and Mrs. James Wilson over Sunday. William Longbottom of Arlington Heights is the guest of his grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. William Burnett of Pleasant Street. Percy Wilson spent last week visiting in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and Providence, Rhode Island. The next section is called Muster. The Firemen's Muster, held in this village last Saturday afternoon under the auspices of the John Edwards Hose Company of the Westford Fire Department, was recently carried out in first-class shape and will be remembered for a long time as one of the most enjoyable gala days ever held. The village was open to the visitors all day and evening, and every courtesy was extended to all who took opportunity to enter its limits. Forge Village presented a pleasing appearance with its well-kept streets and closely trimmed lawns with many floral displays. The hose house and fire wagon of the John Edwards Company were most beautiful in their decorations of flags and bunting, and many residences along the line of sports displayed Old Glory. That is the U.S. flag. Shortly after 2 o'clock, the hose trials for the Clara Choate Samuels Cup were run off. This event had been looked forward to with deep interest for several weeks, for the companies competing from the 3 villages have many followers who were certain their respective choice would win. The following members of the Lowell Fire Department acted as judges: C.D. Foley, starter; Chief Charles Stackpole; Captain D.J. Hurley; timers, Captain J.F. McKissick, referee. The contest called for each team to run 100 yards with 200 feet of those on a roll, lay 100 feet of hose, make connections to hydrant, attach nozzle, and get water. After a most exciting contest, the Graniteville A.R. Choate Hose Company won out with time of 25 seconds. It was a close call, as Westford's Edward M. Abbott Hose Company hit it at 26 seconds. Each of the teams had their trouble owing to blowouts at the hydrant or nozzle, but all did fine work, however handicapped. At the conclusion of the hose races, Captain McKissick of Lowell announced the results of the different trials as we set forth, and formally presented the Silver Cup to the A.R. Choate Company. Captain McKissick congratulated all 3 companies, and in a neat speech ended his remarks by saying that of all the events at which he has officiated, that the Westford Fire Department were the finest fellows he had ever judged. For, as he said, they are good winners and they are good losers, and it was a pleasure for him and his associates to be with them. The hose company races were run off on Pleasant Street, after which the foot races and other sports were run off on Bradford Street. They have a list of all of the races and the winners. I'm not going to read those in the interests of time. This end of the sports of the day, which was on the whole a great success, being very largely attended, many being present from out of town, and all enjoying a thoroughly good time. 5:30 o'clock, an excellent banquet was served in Abbott Hall, which was attended by all three companies of the Westford Fire Department and their invited guests, at the close of which Chief Fletcher, in behalf of the Fire Department, extended his warmest congratulations to the John Edwards Hose Company for the fine entertainment given, and also spoke of the fine feeling of good fellowship which existed at all times in the different companies. In the evening, a social dance was held in Abbott Hall, which was very largely attended. The Colonial Orchestra furnished music for dancing, and refreshments were served during intermission. The whole affair was in charge of the following committees: Sporting, William Precious, Chairman; William Goodall, Frank Lowther, and John W. Catchpole. Dance, Frank Cannell, General Manager; William Goodall, Assistant; John Spinner, Floor Director; Captain Edward Hanley, William D. Roan, Charles Flanagan, and Amy Boucher, aides. Next, we have the Graniteville section. The Dixwells of Lowell met the Graniteville Baseball Club on the local grounds here last Saturday in what promised to be one of the best games of the season. Shortly after the game had started, it was found that the much-touted Dixwells were greatly outclassed, and Graniteville won easily by the score of 11-3. Jack Spinner was on the slab for the local team and had the Dixwells completely at his mercy, only 2 hits being made off his delivery, and he struck out 12 men. He was ably supported behind the bat by his brother. St. Catherine's Church on Sunday morning, 2 masses were celebrated by the pastor, Reverend Schofield. He also announced that the Mass book that was recently presented to the church was the gift of Miss Emma Ward of Forge Village, and the cruets used at the offertory were the gifts of Daniel Mahoney of Westford. Elvin Nelson has recently purchased a Flanders 20 automobile of the runabout type of Robert Murphy and Sons in Ayer. Mr. and Mrs. Clarence McKenna and friend Miss Clara McCall of Harrisville were weekend visitors at the home of Miss Lillian McClenna. Mrs. Winifred Healy and daughter, Miss Mary E. Healy, the popular milliner, are enjoying the sea breezes of Revere. Mr. and Mrs. John Carmichael have returned from their vacation very much sunburned but thoroughly rested. Mr. and Mrs. Timothy Sullivan and daughter, Miss Nora of Marlborough, have been recent guests of Mr. and Mrs. John Healy. Miss Fanny McCarthy is enjoying her vacation at the various beaches. Miss Mamie Healy and Miss Flora Stewart spent last week at the various beaches. Word has been received here of the death of little Bernadette Dudevor. Her name was Marjorie Bernadette Dudevor, and she was born at Westford on October 5th, 1910. Who, with her mother and aunt and brother Russell, have been spending their vacation down in St. John, New Brunswick. Charles Dudevor is employed as chauffeur for Julian Cameron of Westford. When he received word that his little daughter was ill, he immediately set off, and that was the word that he sent back to Wallace Walsh, brother of Mrs. Dudevor. Much sympathy is extended to the parents of the child by the people of this village. Mrs. Anna Harrington of Leominster is spending her vacation at the home of her sister, Mrs. Healy, Mrs. Henry J. Healy. Wesley Hawks, the genial station agent, has resumed his duties this week after a forced vacation of sickness. Miss Ruth Furbush has returned home after spending her vacation with friends in the Catskill Mountains. Miss Etta Wall has returned home after spending her vacation with her sister, Mrs. Frank Riney, at Lowell. Walter Wright, our postmaster, spent Sunday at Pawtucket, Rhode Island. The next paragraph is another death. Edward Leland, son of Mr. and Mrs. George Leland, a popular young man of this village, passed away at his home here on Monday afternoon, aged 22 years and 7 months, after a long and lingering illness. He leaves to mourn his loss, his father and mother, a sister, and 3 brothers. The funeral took place from St. Catherine's Church on Wednesday morning at 7:30, and he was buried in St. Patrick's Cemetery, Lowell. Miss Alice Gilson of this village is spending her vacation in New York with her relatives, Mr. and Mrs. William Gilson. And that's the news in Westford for the week ending August 12th, 1911. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Ryan Cousins of WestfordCAT for providing technical support. You can find transcriptions and podcasts from the Wardsman at our website at museum.westford.org, or visit the Historical Society's Facebook page for more Westford news from days gone by. This is Bob Oliphant, and I hope you will join us for next week's Westford Wardsman podcast. Thank you.